Hello everyone, welcome to Modern 5. In this video, we are going to look at controlled practice activities. We will understand its definition and features and get to know some common types and examples of these types in teaching. First, let's together look at the definition and features of controlled practice activities. Controlled practice activities refer to activities that are restricted in nature. The focus is on developing accuracy rather than fluency. But when should they be in the lesson? Once new language has been introduced to the students, they need to have an opportunity to try it out for themselves. To get students become familiar with the form and get their tongues and brains around it. Controlled practice activities can be used then. So, the answer is, it is used after teacher presenting new language items and before students using the language by themselves in freer activities. So, controlled practice activities have three features. Feature 1, repetition. 2, scaffolding. 3, specific target language focus. Now, let's look at the first one. Repetition means students need to do exercises with a lot of repetition of the target language. Scaffolding means teacher provides a lot of support in the form of prompts to ensure that students can do an exercise or perform a task. Thirdly, the specific target language focus can be from any of the three main system types: vocabulary, grammar, and function, and also spelling and pronunciation. And the language used is rather restrictive, only around the language point that students are learning. With those features of controlled practice exercises in mind, below are some examples of controlled practice activities. Number 1. Drilling. Drilling refers to oral repetition of specific target language. Drilling can be mechanical, that means without much context, or meaningful, that means within a specific context. Ideally, the drilling should be meaningful, of course. In model and drill, teacher or video clip models the target language example, and then the students repeat. In another form, picture passing, for example, students pass the picture around the class and they need to produce some kinds of target language. For example, she has brown hairs. Number 2, bingo. Students get handed a sheet of different vocabulary items, sounds, or grammar points. What they need to do is try it and get a bingo. For example, a horizontal, vertical, or diagonal line on their worksheet based on what the teacher calls out. For example, to practice vocabulary, teacher reads out the word, definition, or a clue for each of the vocabulary words on the sheet. Teacher might say, "This animal goes moo" for a cow. Another popular control practice activity is matching. This activity refers to any activity where students match one item with another. They can match words or phrases to definitions, match synonyms and antonyms, match a phrase to its formality. For example, the phrase "I would like" and the phrase "I want." They can match words and phrases to its more polite or less polite equivalents. For example, the phrase "Would you give me?" or the phrase "give me." They can also match words or phrases or grammatical structures to visuals. Number 4. Fly swappers or touch the board. In this activity, students are equipped with a fly swappers or just simply use their hands. And the first student that swats or touches the correct answer on the whiteboard wins. This activity can be played either in groups or with the whole class. In groups, students are seated in groups and play the game amongst themselves. As one student calls out the clue, the other students competes in slapping the correct answer first. As the whole class, students form 2 lines leading up to the whiteboard. When the teacher says the clue, 2 representatives from 2 groups compete to touch the correct answer first. Number 5. Fill in the blank. This activity refers to the one where there is a block of text, either in sentence or paragraph form, with blanks in them. The students have to write or choose the correct answer to fill in the blank. There are 3 versions to go with this type. 2 options. Next to the gap, there are 2 possible answers to choose from. Word bank. Students have a word bank either with the same number of words or phrases as there are blanks, or more words or phrases than there are blanks. And what they need to do is to choose the correct word or phrase to fill in the blank. The third version is no options. Students are presented with a text with blanks, and they have to produce the correct answer without any prompts or suggestions. The next type is related to sentence level. In sentence reordering, words are presented out of order, and the students have to reorder them appropriately, like the sentence, I went to the store yesterday. Sentence completion. Students complete sentences with their own answers. For example, my favorite color is green. I like green because it is the color of trees and plants, and it can give me a feeling of relaxation. Sentence formation. In these activities, students will form their own complete sentences, either orally or in written form, with teachers' prompts. So, you have just got to know some types of controlled practice activities for students to practice the target language. But how will you apply these ideas in the lessons? Now, let's together look at some practical ideas. Suppose that you have just presented about present perfect tense with for and since. So, what activities will you organize in the control stage? Let's look at 2 examples. The first practical idea is the pointing game. On one piece of paper, write for in capital letters. On another piece of paper, write since. Pin the 2 pieces up on opposite of the classroom. Then, tell the students that they have to point to the correct words when you say a time, date, or year. For example, if you read out 5 years, so they should point to 4. When you have read out all the times, dates, or years that you prepared, stick the pieces of paper with 4 on the board. Read the time expressions out again. This time, they shouldn't point, but shout out for or since. As they shout out the words, write the time expressions under the correct word, for or since. Now, get the students to use the time expressions in other examples. Divide the students into pairs and tell them to make sentences using the time expressions with for or since. And remember to tell them to make the sentences true for them. Give one example of your own to get them started. This activity helps to reinforce the target language by repetition, but it is done in an entertaining way for the students, and it also leads on to students creating sentences about their own lives. This is another very important feature of teaching and learning. If teachers can personalize the target language, it can greatly help the learning process. The next activity to practice present perfect tense can be negative sentence completion. In this activity, teacher divides the class into pairs. Each student writes the beginning of some sentences that use the target language. For example, students might write, I haven't played football for, or I haven't been to the beach since. Teacher asks each student to write the beginnings of 4 or 5 sentences. And when they have done that, teacher has 3 options. First, teacher asks students to pass the sentences to their partner, and then their partner completes them with suitable language that is true for their lives. Or, for a higher level class, the student reads out the beginning of their sentences, and the partner has to complete with the language that is true for them. This is in oral form instead of in written form. Or, for some kind of movement, teacher could ask students to stand up and walk around the class, asking different students to complete different sentences. This activity also contains a lot of repetition in the target language. It helps students acquire language easier. They also have chances to use the language in a meaningful way, which is to talk about their own lives. As you can see, the first activity, pointing game, is an adaptation of get feeling with for or since. The second activity, negative sentence completion, is an adaptation of sentence completion. But both of the two activities are done in an exciting and motivating way. So, while you are thinking about a controlled practice activity for your class, just keep in mind that you need to remember 3 words. The first one is repetition. The second one is personalizing. And the last one is variety. Repetition means at this stage, students need to become familiar with the target language, memorize it, so they need to use the language again and again. It helps them to understand, know how and when to use it, and they have a chance to produce it. In other words, repetition helps them to internalize the new language successfully. Personalizing means students shouldn't use the language to talk about something out of context, something that is not very close to them, not very familiar to them. Students should be given chances to talk about their own lives and experiences. Lastly, variety. Variety means that the activities in the control stages should be repetitive, but too much repetition can have a negative effect on the students. They can become bored and lose interest. So, With a little adaptation of the above-mentioned types of controlled practice activities, teacher can create an entertaining atmosphere in learning. So, we have just had a look at different types of controlled practice activities. Remember that controlled practice activities does not need to be boring. Teacher can reinforce the language in an entertaining way by carrying out games or game-like activities, and personalizing the target language by letting students to talk about themselves and their lives.